listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm joined with Leigh Seebach. She is a certified human design reader, Reiki master, and abundance coach. She is also a 5/1 emotional manifestor in human design. She provides supportive tools for people already on their spiritual journey to help them springboard to the next level and claim their agency. If you're new to human design, you can download a beginner's guide on her website, yourabundantdesign.com, to help you understand this discussion a little more easily. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming out. It's been so nice to just chat with you and get to know you a little bit, and I'm really excited to share your work with our audience.
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely chatting with you too.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know you, could you share just a little bit about who you are and maybe go into what led you to exploring human design?
Who am I? That is such an interesting question. I don't really know how to answer that, except I'm a 5/1 emotional manifestor because my entire lens has gone through human design now. Mm-hmm. But I did just get my Reiki mastership last weekend, so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It was a wild ride that I was not expecting. So I grew up in the church. I understand that you did too. Mm-hmm. So that was rough. I got really lucky in that I went to a Presbyterian church for most of the time that I was in church, and it was PCUSA. So it was a very, very different kind of religious oppression. They tended to use softer methods to keep you in check. Mm-hmm. But it was still very much all about not asking questions. And if you did ask questions, then you better be ready to do some really interesting logic dancing. Right. So I did finally get to leave when I was 25 and went through a really, really long dark night of the soul to try to get to the other side of all of that religious drama. Because, as you know, it can be quite a lot.
Yeah.
So coming out the other side, I made my first Reiki appointment. And that was a beautiful thing. I actually still see her. Her name is Kelly Pratt, and she's amazing. She's in Knoxville if anybody wants to make an appointment. And she really helped me heal through a lot of my religious traumas, a lot of my childhood traumas, and all the things. Mm-hmm. So going through that, of course, once you get into Reiki, you've got to go all the way down the rabbit hole. Right. So I started listening to a lot of different podcasts and the like, and really getting into, magic and that kind of thing. And I was listening to this one podcast that unfortunately no longer exists. It's called Earth Speak. And I miss her terribly. But that is besides the point. She was talking about how she was a projector in human design, and then she just whizzed right past that. Mm-hmm. and didn't talk about it again. And all I could think was, what is human design? I need to look this up immediately. So I did. And then I saw that chart and was, of course, immediately completely overwhelmed because, anybody who's seen a human design chart, the first thought you think is, huh? So I put that down for about 3 months, and I didn't look at it again. But it was swimming around in my head because I have a defined head anagna, so it just, things just whirl around in there constantly. Right. And I was working on coming out of my healing journey. Well, not out, but ready to move forward. Mm-hmm. And I was getting a tarot card reading from a friend of mine who is also my massage therapist, and she's amazing. Her name is Luella, and she has a massage therapy business here in Knoxville. Just to plug one more time. I promise I won't do it again.
No, you're good. Plug it all.
Because she's awesome. And she was just practicing doing a tarot card reading, and so I asked her, I think I'm ready to start giving back now. It's, I've been taking a few years, I've been receiving, and I'm ready to start giving back. And I'm trying to figure out what the best way to do that is. And at the time, I was considering 3 different options. I do not remember what the other 2 were anymore. But the third one was human design. And, she went through the motions of doing a tarot card reading, but she basically just said, you need to do human design. And that was it. And, I was not really in alignment at the time because I am a manifestor and we're not great at doing what we're told, but I wasn't fully there yet. So I was just like, sure, why not? Let's see how this goes.
Right.
And so I got a couple of books on human design and just started really learning it. And I got really frustrated because no matter how many books I seemed to read, I still didn't understand how the system worked. And I'm one of these people, my father's an engineer. I want to know how things work. Mm-hmm. And so it really bothered me that there wasn't a lot of information on how you're supposed to read this chart, how the planets are moving inside these gates, how this whole process works. There just wasn't a lot that was available, like just in a book or for free or anything. So I got a certification and paid the big bucks and went to the big school and got the certification. And now I know how it works.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we all appreciate that you've taken the time to examine it, because I think many of us have hit that same wall of like, I don't understand how these pieces are interconnecting. And so it's really awesome to work with someone who's kind of mastered it so that you can really settle into, okay, I am seeing this properly. Oh, and I missed that. And this, so you can really help guide them and maybe clarify some of the things that don't necessarily make sense right out of the gate.
Yes. And that is why that beginner's guide is on my website. I actually made that specifically as a guide for the people like me who want to understand how this whole thing works. Mm-hmm. It is the guide that I wish I had when I was learning human design. It really teaches you how to read that chart.
Right. So if someone were to get a reading, if they kind of looked at that first, then when they have the reading with you, they already kind of have an understanding of, oh, this was my question, or this is what I want to explore more.
Yes.
So, because if you don't know anything about it, it's kind of hard to know, like, well, what are you seeking from this reading?
Exactly.
So you can be more intentional with, the time working with someone who has all this knowledge. So you want to be able to get as much useful information as possible in that time frame. So that's really beautiful that you've done that. And I think that that's a great resource for people that are wanting to dip their toes into this wonderful modality.
Thank you.
Okay, so how is human design different from some of the other modalities?
So one of the biggest things that differentiates human design from, say, like astrology or Reiki or yoga or crystals, essential oils, the list goes on and on,
right.
Is human design is very, very centered on giving you your agency. It takes that very, very seriously. It, in essence, is actually an experiment. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a tool that says, here, try making your decisions this way. See if it works and get back to me.
Right.
So, with all of these systems, with essential oils, like, I love essential oils. Don't get me wrong. I love all of those except for yoga. I really hate yoga. The thing that I hate most about yoga is that it works. That drives me crazy.
That's funny.
But with all of those systems, you are looking to an outside authority to teach you. But with human design, it yes, there is an element of outside authority because it is giving you a way to make decisions, but it is ultimately your decision on whether or not you even use it.
Right.
So it's all about giving you agency.
Okay.
Which is something that I really, really love and appreciate about human design because it does not seek to control you.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's more of a guideline versus like a rule book.
Yeah. And, it's also an excellent tool for, shadow work and self-discovery, self-awareness, all the things. Mm-hmm. It's an incredibly multifaceted system, which is unsurprising. It's a synergy of 7 other systems. So,
right.
So it's not at all unreasonable that it would be multifaceted. Mm-hmm. But it is first and foremost a tool to make decisions.
Right.
That ultimately are supposed to get you closer to God, the universe, your higher self, whatever you want. It's all the same. So,
right. So what are some of the things within human design that help guide some of those decision-making, that decision-making process?
Okay, so in human design, we have something called a type. There's only 5 of them. They are... well, not really at all similar to your sun sign, but, as far as categorization goes, it's somewhat, there's a bit of a crossover. Mm-hmm. So, like, I am a manifester, and that is my type. You are a generator, and that is your type. Mm-hmm. There's 3 others. There's manifesting generators, there's projectors, and there's reflectors. So each type has a strategy. Mm-hmm. For me, there's a little bit of disagreement actually on what the manifestor strategy is. Most manifestors say it's actually to initiate, but if you're not a manifestor, you're far more likely to say it's to inform.
Okay.
And both are true. Mm-hmm. But for a manifestor, we are always initiating. It's not necessarily our strategy, but it is what comes so naturally. It's just what we do. Mm-hmm. So for a manifestor, the act of informing, which is our strategy, isn't so much about making decisions. It's about getting people out of the way once we have.
Okay.
Or to help us, if we're lucky, it's to help us. Mm-hmm. But you are a generator. So your strategy is actually to respond. It's mm-hmm. to wait to respond, technically. So where that comes into play is a generator has more energy than the other types. That sacral energy that you guys have, it is 50% of the energy in a body graph, mm-hmm. which is what your chart is called, guys. So you guys have so much energy, and a lot of what you're using that energy for is to respond to your outside environment. And a lot of people get this confused when we talk about spirituality and we talk about signs and how we're seeing signs and how that sign is supposed to be a confirmation of something you wanted it to be a confirmation of. Mm-hmm. And you can use it that way. That's a perfectly valid thing to do. But for human design, that sign is not what matters for a generator. Mm-hmm. For a generator, what matters is how you respond to that sign.
Right.
So a generator has it kind of works like a pendulum. You've got the yes, the no, and the maybe. Mm-hmm. And that actually comes in the form, at least for some generators, as a sacral sound, like uh-huh, or uh-uh, or
Right.
So, and if you're a manifesting generator, and if you're a high-powered generator too, you may even find yourselves having a bodily movement that comes with this. So like if it's a yes, you actually lean towards it. If it's a no, then you lean away from it. And if it's a I don't know, then you just stay still. So that is also a common reaction or response.
Right.
So then you've got projectors who wait for the invitation because projectors have this really penetrating aura. Whenever a projector looks at you, it's a little bit like you got shot with an arrow. It can be really, really intense. And then if you add on to that a projector giving you advice about something, it's like you got shot with an arrow again.
Right. It feels like unsolicited advice versus
Yes.
if you ask them.
Yes, then you actually have the opportunity to catch that arrow.
Right.
As opposed to getting shot with it.
Right.
So that's why we tell projectors to wait for the invitation. And it's funny because my mom's a projector. And when I was telling her about human design, I have watched her my entire life give incredibly unsolicited but valid advice to people and them react very negatively towards that.
Right, because maybe they're not ready for that truthful penetrative information that might change their life.
Right.
Maybe they're not ready to make the change.
Yes. And she's an incredibly insightful person. Mm-hmm. So it does. Like, if you're not ready for it, it feels like you've been shot.
Right. It's like, are you interrogating me?
Because it sometimes feels like it. But when I told her about her human design and how she is a projector, she started waiting for the invitation. And she's a substitute teacher, and she's got so many different examples about how she was in a situation and she waited for that invitation before she started, running her mouth. And it was so much better received.
Right.
And all she had to do was wait.
Right.
So that's a beautiful thing for projectors to know about themselves. It's not that you don't ever give advice. Mm-hmm. It's not that you don't ever exchange energy with people. It's just that you have to wait for the right time.
And then I feel like it helps you save your energy because you're not wasting it on someone that's not ready to receive your wisdom.
Yes.
And so that can feel kind of draining, I would say.
Absolutely. And projectors do not have the energy to waste. Mm-hmm. They are a non-energy type, as far as human design goes. They don't have a lot of energy. It's so very important for them to rest as often as possible. So all that pushing that they tend to want to do, it's incredibly counterproductive. It just makes people mad. Yeah. And it's exhausting. So highly recommend you don't do that if you're a projector. Then we've got manifesting generators. And manifesting generators are kind of a combination between generators and manifestors. Ultimately, manifesting generators are just generators with a little bit of manifestor sprinkled on top.
Okay.
So they're still here to respond. Mm-hmm. It is all about that response. And it's a very strong response usually. But they also, because they move so fast, because man-gens, I'm going to call them man-gens because manifesting generators, a mouthful.
Right.
So man-gens, they move fast and they break things.
Right.
So giving people a heads up when you're going to move fast and break something, it really helps. Mm-hmm. That's that little bit of manifestor sprinkled on top. And then you've got reflectors. And reflectors, it is highly unlikely that you're a reflector. They only make up 1% of the population. Most people are not. So when you are a reflector, your strategy is actually to wait a full lunar cycle to make a decision. Now, obviously, you don't have to do this to decide where to go out to eat.
Right.
But for like big major decisions, especially like whether or not to take a new job or to whether or not to move or,
Right, invest into something.
Yeah. The kinds of things where there's big energy exchanges, life-altering things.
Right.
Like you're going to want to wait.
On it.
Yeah. And we say to wait for an entire lunar cycle because the moon actually hits every single gate through a lunar cycle. So you can experience all of those energies through a lunar cycle.
Right.
And with reflectors being so open to the energies around them, that lunar cycle is very important to them.
Mm-hmm. So does this have to do with like the aura? So I've heard something with reflectors like don't have like the aura structure the same way?
No, all of the types have a different aura structure.
Okay.
If anything, manifestors are the ones with the really different aura structure from the rest. Because all of the other types have a form of receiving energy.
Okay.
And manifestors don't. We are strictly an initiation energy. It's kind of like a relay race when it comes to the types and their aura types. Like the manifestor starts and they hand it off to the projector, who hands it off to the generator, who hands it off to the manifesting generator, who hands it off to the reflector.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it works. Or yeah.
So they are kind of all working in like this symbiotic way.
Yes.
Together.
Yes.
And that's maybe where the community comes in.
Absolutely. Because human design is a system of interdependence.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that. So could we explore the self and not self themes that come up?
Absolutely. That's also all about your type.
Okay.
So that's super convenient. So I'll see if I can go in the same order I did last time. Manifestors, our self theme is actually peace. And if you talk to a manifestor about peace, it does not sound like everybody else's peace. A manifestor piece is usually filled with a fair amount of excitement. So it's not, it can be, sitting on the ground going, but it can also be running a marathon or sitting at your computer creating something new. It varies a lot as to what peace is for a manifestor, but you know it when you feel it. There's like a very specific frequency that a manifestor hits when they are in their peace.
Okay.
Now, the not self theme for a manifestor is anger. And manifestors can have really, really explosive anger when we are not in our self theme. Mm-hmm. It can be rough on the people we love. We have to actually be kind of careful. And something that happens with women, especially manifestor women, is we are very much conditioned as women to not show anger ever. Mm-hmm. We're just not supposed to do that. So a very common theme amongst manifestor women is to obviously not show that we're angry. So we bury it.
Yeah, repression.
Yes, we bury it. We repress it. It's like it never happened. And we hold on to it. Specifically in the liver. And we hold on to it, and we hold on to it, and we nurse these grudges, and we nurse them for a while longer, and then it's like it's a part of our being. All of these people that we would like to murder, but would never say so.
Right, because that would be mean.
That would be mean, and women can't be mean.
Right.
Because we can't be angry. So it's very, very common for manifestor women, to have liver problems. Mm-hmm. Magnesium, best friend, see a doctor first. But
right.
So it's very common for manifestor women to have liver problems. It's also very common for manifestor women to experience depression.
Right.
Because when you hold on to that much anger, it's going to be exhausting.
Right.
Because you're living in your not self.
Right.
And just constantly living in that not self. So if you have depression and you are a manifestor, it is entirely possible that you're not actually depressed. You're just angry.
Right. There's a bitterness.
No, bitterness is projectors, and it's a little bit different. It can look like bitterness, but that's just because we're women.
Right. Okay.
No, we're actually angry.
Okay.
We're just not willing to fess up to it.
Right. Okay.
So like one thing that I did, and it was while I was going through my Reiki journey and everything, is we had a fireplace in our basement that is no longer there because I hit it a lot with a pickaxe. It was ugly. It was incredibly ugly and non-functional, and you couldn't do anything about it. So highly recommend hitting things, then getting energy work. Hit things, energy work. Hit things, energy work. Just don't hurt anybody.
Right. I like this.
So then we can move on to generators. And this is true for manifesting generators too, to an extent. Generators, when they are in their self theme, feel satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because like when the world is full of generators. You guys make up about 70-ish% of the population. So there's so much verbiage and talk about experiencing satisfaction in your work, in your life, in whatever. And it's like, so everybody knows that the goal is satisfaction, but it's actually just the goal for generators.
Right.
So, yeah, that's satisfaction. And then the not self theme for generators is frustration, which can look a little bit like anger, but it's actually different. And it's so interesting. My brother's a generator, and I watched this happen in him not that long ago. He was applying for a job, or attempting to, and, Indeed's just the devil. And he was getting frustrated, and I watched this happen, and I have a wide open sacral, so like not only was I watching him get frustrated, I could feel him get frustrated in my sacral, and it was like, this is so interesting. And he was trying so hard to hide it, and he wasn't yelling or anything. He was just, but like you could see the little tapping thing that he was doing on the keyboard. And it was like it was getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. It's like, I think he probably could have, but I couldn't take it anymore. And so I made him go outside and scream.
Yeah.
And so he released that frustration.
Right.
And that was a beautiful thing, to just watch him and witness him release this frustration and get calmed down. And then we could actually have a conversation about what was really bothering him, because it obviously wasn't Indeed.
Right.
And I won't go into that because it doesn't matter, but it's so interesting how we can have things that will trigger our anger or our frustration that don't actually have anything to do with why we're in our not self.
Right.
So that's generators. Then projectors, they get to experience success for their self-theme, which is super fun. And that's a beautiful thing to see, because, every projector has a different definition of what success even is. And so they can really step into it as they get closer and closer to alignment. And that's a beautiful thing. But then there's bitterness, and that is their not self theme. And of course we can all experience these emotions. Like,
right.
They're not exclusive to projectors or anything.
It's just going to indicate, right? Like
it's an indicator.
So like when I feel frustrated as a generator, I need to check that.
Exactly.
And say, maybe this isn't in alignment with what's going on, and that's why it's frustrating me.
Exactly.
So with the bitterness, that would be kind of the flag or the signal to like,
yes,
pause for a second, ask yourself like, why am I bitter, or something like that.
Exactly. And bitterness is a little bit more difficult to identify.
Right.
It's just a little bit, we don't really think about bitterness all that much. So there's this amazing podcast on human design that I highly recommend. I swore I wouldn't plug anymore, but I'm sorry. This is the best human design podcast there is.
Right.
It's called De Luna, and it's run by 2 projectors.
Okay.
And one of them describes bitterness as looking at someone else's life and going, must be nice.
Okay.
And it's like, yes, that right there, that is bitterness. And that is the best description of bitterness for a projector that I've ever heard. So then you've got reflectors. And reflectors, they get to experience joy in surprise. And that's just, kind of amazing. I love that for them. Joy and surprise. It's like, that's a beautiful thing. But then their not self theme is disappointment. And I know we're all very familiar with what disappointment feels like, so I don't think we need to go into that one. But yeah, that's all the self and not self themes.
All right. I really like that. I'm not like an expert in human design, but some of these little things that you've went over, I've worked with them in my life, and I have found them to really help guide, and the little experiments usually work out in my favor. So with the whole response thing, I was telling you earlier, with the podcast, like someone just threw that idea out there, And it was a yes. And it was just so like a loud yes, like, you know, like that's going to happen.
That's beautiful.
So I've really leaned into that. And when I feel like something's a no, I've been giving myself permission to just accept it.
Yes.
I don't have to sit there and like give 100 excuses why it's a no. And so it's something about human design has helped to support me in saying, no, that's not going to work for me today.
That's beautiful.
You know, maybe ask me again next week and I'll respond differently. But
and that can happen with sacral authority.
Right.
Oh, yeah, and we didn't go over authorities, but...
Oh, okay.
Because, you know, the type has a strategy.
Okay.
And then everybody's got their own authority as well.
Okay.
I can hit on a couple of those if you want.
Okay, yeah. Let's lightly go over that.
Okay, so everybody's got their own strategy, but we also have our own authority, and they don't necessarily have much to do with each other. There's some connections, like only generators can have sacral authority, and reflectors can only have lunar authority. So it's like it's the same. But there's also emotional authority, and most types can have emotional authority. It's really only reflectors that can't. And that's when you have a defined solar plexus. So if you have a defined solar plexus, you have emotional authority. Done. So emotional authority comes with something called an emotional wave. You do not have this.
Okay.
I do, but you don't. And an emotional wave is really interesting because it can make you feel a certain way that has absolutely nothing to do with your external circumstances. So, like, you can be happy at a funeral and sad at a birthday party.
Right.
So that's one of those things that you kind of have to be careful with when you're making decisions, because you can get yourself in situations that you don't necessarily want to be in. And you can also pass on things that would have actually been really great for you if you make decisions in the moment.
Right.
So for people with emotional authority, it's really important to take your time to make decisions.
Okay.
As opposed to sacral authority, where you can just make snap decisions. It's so quick
for me.
Yes.
But, you know, that aligns too with my Mercury being in Aries, and it is very, it's so instant, and then it burns out. So I'm like, I need to make this right now, because I'm not going to want to make this in 2 hours.
Yes.
And that might be a generator thing. You know, I'm always generating new ideas.
Yes.
But I have to be careful because I'm already on to the next one. So I'm like, is this worth my time? If it's a yes, I'll just make it. Yeah. And I'm really great at quick projects where it's like a start and a finish, and then I want to rest.
And that makes total sense for you because you have sacral authority.
Right.
And you've also got that 3410, which is so creative and so powerful, but it also burns out.
It does burn out. Like, that's the big thing with my homeopath. I'm like, I love reading. I love investigating. I love making art. But I have to be mindful that the burnout will come, and I need to allow myself to rest. And because of human design, I have allowed myself, if I'm not lit up that day and I'm tired, then I'm like, I must need to like maybe recharge. Because if you think about a generator, you know, it can't run 24 hours a day.
No, absolutely not.
Sometimes we need to turn the generator off. And so I'm starting to now look at that burnout that's just the sign that I need to go into resting, because I will push myself too far sometimes.
Sure.
And then it might take twice as long to go into recovery.
Yep.
So I also credit human design for helping me be more mindful of my energy. And say, okay, I just made a project. I don't necessarily have to start the next one right now if I'm tired.
Right.
And then when I'm lit up by the next one and I'm excited, I'm like, now's the day. Like, this is the time, right? And I love when I wake up and I'm like, it's finally the day to start the new thing. I feel good again. Like,
that's beautiful.
But it is human design that's helped me kind of lean into that and support myself where I'm at in those present moments. And it's just really, it's really helpful, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just love how you lean into that sacral energy and really actually pay attention to what your sacral needs.
Right.
And give it.
Right.
It's amazing how many people just completely ignore it. I mean, I cannot tell you how many readings I have done for people who will say, well, how do I circumvent this?
Right.
It's like, well, you can't.
Right.
If your sacral said no, if your sacral said rest, that's that,
Right.
If you do what your sacral says, then you will actually be able to do more later.
Right.
But it's such a difficult concept to understand because in the society that we have, it's always go, 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 go. And you're not supposed to rest.
Right.
And that's one thing that I love about human design is it's like this one huge permission slip to take a nap.
Yes. Yes.
And I love that. As a non-sacral being, it's like I needed that permission slip to take a nap. I took one today, actually, before I came here. And that was a wonderful thing because my brain was foggy and I needed to rest. And I'm a manifester. If I need to rest, I'm going to do it.
Right.
So.
And it's like, you're not being lazy. And I think somehow this productive society has convinced us that if we're not working all the time, it's from dusk to dawn, it's like, or dawn to dusk. Yeah, don't
Either
work
way.
from dusk to dawn, please. That's
Some people do.
Right. But it's like there can be either that frustration or I'm a disappointment or now I'm bitter or whatever. You can see how just the way our society is structured would push us into those not self themes because the society is not structured to support our energy and our passions and make sure we all have time to recharge and like that we're taking care of our bodies when we're in those down moments. And it's just like, well, you just need to keep going. So I know you're off work, but your kid has a soccer game. I know the soccer game's over, but you're going to need to, send that email. And I know that you just sent the email, but now you need to make sure you get that yoga class in because you promised yourself you would, and it's just like,
Yeah.
you can see how the culture might tend to push people into the non-self themes.
Oh, yeah.
And say, oh, well, you're being lazy by resting. You could have checked 3 more boxes off your to-do list.
I could have, but I chose not to.
Right. But I love
Yes.
things like this. It's like you're not being lazy. You're recharging.
Right.
And you will come out on the other side of it more inspired or more focused or more driven or maybe clear to where you could, reflect properly because you have rested and or
Exactly.
taken the lunar cycle, So it's kind of cool to see that structure and to work with your human design and just experiment with it. That's kind of how I've just been like winging it. And
Yeah.
when the experiments continued to go well, I'm like, I'm really going to listen to this. I'm going to listen to this when it's a yes, I'm going to go for it. Like people will ask me to come on podcasts sometimes and I'm like, okay, it feels like a yes. And I'm always glad. But then there was a couple where I'm like, I just don't know. It just doesn't feel like it might be indifference. And I kind of, if it's not a strong yes, then I don't respond right away.
And that's good. I mean, yeah, like with generators especially, and it can be true for some other things too, but like with generators who have that sacral authority, generally best practices are if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no.
Right.
And just be done.
It is nice to just stop it right there.
Yeah.
And to say.
And it might be a hell yes later.
Right.
It's like, if you feel the urge to check in on it, there's no problem with that.
Right.
Because answers change.
Right. Depending on what's occurring or what's happening in that moment. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been super, super helpful. And I do love that it encourages you to experiment with it instead of saying this is the way and you have to do it. You can choose to do it this day and like try to align with it and maybe choose not to the next and see how those days were different. So I really like that it gives you this opportunity to play with it and explore and be open.
Yes.
And it's not so rigid and like you have to do it this way or, it's a bad omen or something, like people would be worried to go against the rules.
And there are some human design readers who are very all about the rules. I mean, don't get me wrong, that exists. You can find dogma in any system.
Right.
So there are absolutely people who will give you a reading that will give you a bunch of rules to follow. I'm just not one of them. And I generally think that kind of goes against the spirit of human design. So.
Right. These are just kind of guidelines that you could choose
to follow,
but you don't have to.
Exactly.
Like, you're not going to, we don't want to turn into the church, be like, you're going to burn in hell if you don't follow your strategy.
I mean, I do find that my life flows better when I'm
Right.
following my strategy and authority.
Right.
But, I have emotional authority, which is the most complicated authority a person can have.
Right.
And half of the population has emotional authority. And with emotional authority, you're only ever about 80% sure in whatever it is you're deciding to do. So you're
Right.
going to sometimes get it wrong.
Right.
So it's, you're going to mess up.
Right. And that's okay.
It's totally fine. You just pick up and try again.
Right. The next day with like what you're dealing with that day.
Or you can put it down and never do it again. And chances are you'll probably get there another way eventually anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So can we go a little bit into the centers versus the chakras?
Okay. So human design is based on the Hindu chakra system.
Okay.
Amongst many other things.
Right.
But in talking about the centers, that is relatively equivalent to talking about the chakras in the Hindu chakra system, with a few key differences. So in the Hindu chakra system, it's generally believed that there's about 7 chakras,
Right.
7 main ones.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's like way more, but we generally talk about the 7.
Right.
In human design, we believe is not the right word, we posit that there are 9 centers.
Okay.
So there's, starting at the top and working our way down, there's the head, which is most closely aligned with the crown chakra. There is the ajna, which I am told is actually the Sanskrit word for your third eye.
Right. Yes.
Oh, cool. I feel like I Googled that once and that was true, but
Yes.
then there is the throat, which is obviously the same. And then we get a little bit weird. So then we get to something called the G center, which I feel, and you're not going to find anything to verify this, but I feel like it's your high heart right here.
All right.
To me, that's just where the G center lives. And that is one of the split areas. So in human design, we posit that in I think it was 1791 with the discovery of some planet, we split from 7-centered beings to 9-centered beings.
Okay.
And that is one of the splits that happened. The heart split from the heart to the heart and the G center.
Okay.
So G center up here, this is an identity source. This is like your main source of identity. Yours is super active.
Okay.
And that's why there's all that self-expression going on. It's because you've got a really, really active G center.
I really enjoy holding my hand in this space, when I'm
I'm
meditating.
sure. Yeah.
And
that
I
makes total sense.
Yeah. I wonder if that's something I just love sitting.
Yeah, because it connects directly up to your sacral. It's the
Okay.
only channel you have going from your sacral to your G center. And it's like that G
And then
center
sometimes
is-
I'll sit like this.
Yeah, I'm
Stop!
sure.
Okay, this totally just clicked for me.
Yeah. So yes, that makes total sense. Then you've got your heart. Now the heart, in the Hindu chakra system, they generally consider that to be your emotional center. In human design, we don't. In human design, we consider that to be more like your will center or your ego center. It's very much about willpower and confidence and worthiness and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And a note about the heart center is that only a third of people actually have this defined. So only a third of people have a consistent feeling of worthiness. Neither, we do not. You don't have it defined. I don't have it defined. Mine's actually wide open. So I am very much affected by feeling unworthy on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, I definitely, even with my homeopathy constitutional remedy, it's knees reassurance is one of the big rubrics. And sometimes I'm not super confident. And sometimes someone just speaking, love or something, just encouragement into me is it helps me. And so that's very
Yes.
interesting that.
Yeah, one of the things and I don't know how healthy this is necessarily, but it works for me, and that's all that really matters, is one of the things that I'll say to myself on a relatively regular basis in the mirror is, I'm not special. I am a human being who is worthy of love, dignity, and respect, just like everybody else. And one of the things that I feel like we do as people with undefined hearts is we make ourselves special because somehow we are uniquely terrible.
Okay.
And like, we're not.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I really focus on a lot for myself, because this is wide open for me. So it is a problem area.
Okay.
Maybe not problem. Problem's probably not the right word.
It might need a little bit more.
It needs extra care and attention.
And love. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So then we move down to the solar plexus. Now, in the Hindu chakra system, the solar plexus is really where your willpower comes from.
Right.
But in human design, that's your emotional center.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's kind of like a whole shuffling around thing that happened in 1791, I think is the year. I probably should have Googled that before I got to a microphone.
Yeah. It's okay. My gut does, like, when I get upset, I actually feel like that's when my stomach like does the contracting thing.
Yep.
And even in my Akashic Records class, they asked us all a question like, "Where do you feel this?" And it was like an emotion, and I was like, "I feel it in my stomach." And so that's very interesting because you would think the heart.
You would think, but most people, like when you ask them, they'll say they feel their emotions right here in the stomach.
Yeah.
And human design.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting observation there.
Yeah, it's like very few people that I have talked to say that they feel their emotions in their heart. Most people say it's in their stomach, at least in my experience.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, then you've got the sacral, and that's pretty much the same, actually. We didn't change much as far as the sacral goes.
Okay.
It's still, sexual energy, creative energy, like all the things. It's basically the same. But then we move on to the spleen, which the spleen is very much associated also with the root chakra.
Okay.
So we contend that the root split off to include the spleen. Well, exclude the spleen. It's got its own center now. So the spleen is really all about this instinct and intuition and bodily well-being. So like when you get that prickle on the back of your neck, you think somebody's watching you, that's your spleen.
Okay.
Or when you think somebody's about to crash into you and so you swerve the other way, that's your spleen.
Okay.
That kind of thing. It's, it's this safety mechanism.
Right.
And your intuition. So one thing we didn't talk about was splenic authority. So you've got the sacral authority, which you have, and that's just exactly like your strategy. And then there's projectors and manifestors who sometimes have splenic authority. So their spleen like literally talks to them.
Okay.
Which is very cool.
Right.
I do not have splenic authority.
Right. Well, it sounds awesome, though.
I know, right? I don't even have a defined spleen, but it is very interesting. I've got a friend who's a projector, and she has splenic authority, and just the way that she speaks, it's got a completely different cadence to it, and it's very obviously intuitive, and it's just fascinating to listen to her speak.
Right.
So that's the spleen.
Okay.
Then we've got the root chakra or center. And in human design, the head and the root are actually both pressure centers. So the head gives you the pressure to always want to know the answer. And the root is the pressure to do. Okay. And it is all about the doing. And it's like, you got to get up, you got to move, you got to do.
Right.
Just anything. And it was so cute. I was hanging out with a friend the other day, and she is a relatively new business owner. And when you first get into business, there's so much to do.
Yeah.
There's so much, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And she's got this defined root center, and I think normally she has a really good handle on her defined root center, because most people with defined roots, they get used to the pressure to do, and they just kind of deal.
Right.
But she was letting it overwhelm her. and I have an undefined root. So it was like really affecting me. I was like, I need to go do things too.
Right.
Here, let me help you. And so I had to sit there for just a minute and center myself and realize that this is actually someone who is very out of alignment right now. Right. And I can participate in that, or I can model alignment with stillness and give her the chance to bring herself back into alignment with her root center. And, you know, it took me a good 20 minutes to figure out that that's what I needed to do, because root energy is like intense.
Right.
But once I did, it was amazing how quickly she calmed down. And that's one of the things that people with undefined centers, we can actually do, is because we can get such great wisdom from our undefined centers, because we can experience such a breadth of information when it comes to these centers. So we do like create this great modeling for people with defined centers to help them work through that kind of thing.
So just because your chart isn't lit up and all colorful and all those areas are open, it doesn't mean that you can't access those spaces.
No, absolutely not.
Because I was really depressed when I first saw my chart, and my friend showed me hers, and it was like a rainbow and like all the energy was flowing. And I was like, I look really boring. And
No.
I'm not a boring person, and my chart looks boring. And it was because those other centers weren't lit up with color.
Yeah.
And so I was like, am I not able to like work with that? Or
No. It's a very big misconception with human design that undefined is bad and defined is good.
Right.
And that's not true at all. Undefined is inconsistent and defined is consistent. And that is really all that means.
Okay.
You can actually, like, I have an undefined spleen. And it has tripped me up my entire life. When I was reading about all of the not self themes of an undefined spleen, I just read a biography of all of the things that have gone wrong in my life.
Right.
So one of the things that I've really been doing is tracking the transits, noticing when I have a defined spleen through the transits.
So that'll activate.
It activates,
those areas.
exactly.
Okay.
And it's really funny because I've been going through the splenic definition journey for the past couple of years and really getting to know that splenic energy. And so now I have this breadth of wisdom when it comes to splenic energy because A, I know what's going on.
Right.
And B, I'm tuning into what's going on.
Right.
So I have a much better understanding of how the spleen works.
Right.
On an embodied level rather than just a logical one.
Right.
So that's something that you can do with your undefined centers that is actually significantly more difficult to do with your defined centers.
Okay.
And that's a beautiful journey that I've actually really enjoyed taking. And I'm not done with it. Like right now, I have the Gate of Skills coming out of my throat. And then right now, one of the nodes, I can't remember which, I think it's the north one, is currently in Gate 48, which is the Gate of Depth. And together, they make the channel of the wavelength. The wavelength is amazing for learning new things.
Right.
Just incredible. So I've been really focusing on learning new things. Like I just got my Reiki mastership. Right. And I learned how to do SEO.
Right.
And like 10 other things. But like since May. And I've just been learning and learning. But I wouldn't have known why I was constantly getting the urge to learn something new if I wasn't tracking that transit. Right. And I wouldn't have known that it was actually a really good time to lean into that.
Right.
I would have, if I wasn't tracking that transit, I probably would have just written it off as like a thought.
Right. And you might have not made as much space to pursue.
Exactly.
But you were like, okay, this is actually in alignment. I'm going to make space for this.
Yes.
Because this is a really good opportunity to
Right.
ride the wave. So it's like looking at the weather before you go surfing instead of just like going out there and being like, oh, wow, these waves are really big today. I guess I could surf. I guess so it's like gives you this structure and also helps you, time things and like plan ahead a little bit.
Exactly.
So are the transits affecting all the different types in a similar way, or is it based on their specific chart with like where their channels or gates are?
So, yes and no. I am a manifester, so I am not as affected by other people as non-manifestors are.
Okay.
Manifestors have this initiating energy, but we don't have a lot of receiving energy in our auras. So our receiving energy tends to be directed upward towards the planets more than outward towards other people. So manifestors tend to be a little bit more affected by the transits than the other types are.
Okay.
That's not to say that the other types aren't affected by the transits, because they absolutely are. And we are all affected by the transits in different ways and in some of the same ways.
Okay.
Like a lot of people with the transits really enjoy tracking the sun and the earth gates. In human design, there's an earth gate that we travel through. It's always opposite the sun.
That's like in esoteric astrology, the earth is always opposite the sun, and they actually use the earth as one of the planets.
I love that. I've always wondered why astrology didn't include the earth as one of the planets. I'm so glad somebody does.
Yes.
That makes me happy. It's always confused me.
I mean, it does make sense. It is a planet, so
right. It's like, why is it not included?
Yeah, I feel you.
That was one of the things that I loved about human design when I saw that it included the earth. It's like, yes, that's exactly what we should be doing. So a lot of people do track the sun and the earth gates, but mostly the sun gates. And granted, the sun's sending off a lot of energy. It absolutely matters. It absolutely affects us. I personally don't really keep up with it.
Yeah.
Because I actually really prefer to look at what channel connections I'm going to be making with the transits. I think it's a much more personalized way to look at the transits, because it gives me the opportunity to know, like, is my spleen going to be defined today? Is my sacral going to be defined today? Is today a good day to clean the bathroom? Because if I have an undefined sacral, it's not.
Right.
So, like, it's just easier to know when I'm going to have access to more energy.
Right.
And it's easier to know when I'm going to have access to my intuition more easily. Because, I have my own consistent intuition in my head and my ajna, so I can get downloads super easily. Mm-hmm. But your splenic intuition is a whole other animal.
Right.
And it has this whole different vibe. And the vibe that it gives off is very much dependent on the gate that is activated, at least for me. Because, right now it's telling me I need to learn things. But 2 weeks ago, it was telling me something completely different.
Right.
A month ago. Because it's in the node. So it was a little bit ago. But yeah, so for me, I like the personalized journey of the transits a lot more than this generic journey of the transits, which you see a lot of in the gene keys and the human design spaces. Mm-hmm. They are very, very focused on what the sun is doing. And, like, I get that. I just tend to believe that astrologically and human design speaking, there are two most important moments in your life. And that is the moment you were born and the moment that you are in. And that's when they matter.
Right.
So.
Right. So I'm curious, because you are a Reiki master, and we're talking about these energy centers. Mm-hmm. When you're doing Reiki, can you almost like guess or like feel like, okay, this is probably a more open energy for this person? Like for me, if you were doing Reiki, would you notice my sacral center might be high functioning just based on performing Reiki? Or
sometimes.
Because I've had a Reiki person who is not a human design expert, and she specifically pointed out that my sacral center was just like soaking up all of the energy, and she kept she was like staying in that spot longer. Mm-hmm. And that makes me wonder if it has something to do with my human design, that I might be like more active in that space. So I was just curious, like, you don't have to answer it, but if there was some overlap with the Reiki and the chakras and the energy flow.
So there can be. But, you know, we all experience conditioning in all of our centers, whether we're defined or undefined. So we just experience it in different ways. And that's a bit of a misnomer about human design, is everybody thinks that you don't experience conditioning in your defined centers, and you absolutely do.
Right.
I worked on a manifesting generator not that long ago who had a throat center that was so closed off and so globby. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It was, it was just awful. I felt so sorry for her. And it was because she wasn't saying something. Like, there were these things that needed to come out. Now, all manifesting generators have defined throats, but that does not mean that we won't experience it, or they won't, because I'm not a manifesting generator, but they won't experience throat wounds.
Right.
In fact, like, for defined throats, we have, it's very common, especially for women, but it can happen in men too, a reactive or a repressive throat wound that tends to come with having a motor that goes to your throat.
Right.
So, yeah, we still experience conditioning in the throat. You're a generator. You're still going to experience conditioning in your sacral.
Right.
Do we talk about the fact that you're a mother?
Yeah, you can talk about
that. I'm just checking. So you have had children. That is an incredibly traumatic experience for the sacral center, especially the way that we have children these days. You know, I don't know how you did it, but most people go to a hospital and...
I did midwives, but it was in a hospital. So it was
so it was a little...
Yeah, the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Like, my anxiety of living out in the country wasn't as bad because I was like, well, I'll already be at the hospital. So I did choose that because of how far away I live from society, that I would rather just go be like driving as soon as I started to notice that I was in labor. So...
Sure, that makes total sense.
But it is traumatic for many women.
It is.
Especially with cesarean and the cutting, and it's just like kind of feels invasive, you know.
Well, and it is no matter what. I mean, you've literally got another human growing inside you.
Right.
And I mean, we're discovering new things all the time about how pregnancy works, and it turns out like it is very much your body reacts to it like it's a parasite.
Yeah, I didn't love being pregnant. Like, I know some people really enjoy it, and I don't know if that has to do with the sacred center thing, but I was very happy to be like, okay, that was the last child. Like, I don't want any more children. I don't want to be pregnant ever again, and I don't want to give birth. Like, it wasn't this ecstatic thing for me. Like, it's cool. It was cool to have the experience, but it wasn't like something that I want to continue doing over and over again. It was like, that was good. Okay, I got the kids. Let's just take care of the children now. So I don't know if that has anything to do with I never really thought about the sacral space kind of having to share that energy with someone else.
But it does.
Yeah.
And that's intense. And then the process of giving birth, even if it goes perfectly, is still extraordinarily traumatic.
Yeah.
There's no getting around that.
Right.
So that absolutely affects your sacral chakra. It affects your root chakra. It makes a big impact. And that does not matter what type you are.
Right.
It may impact you differently based on some of your gates and channels, but it's going to impact you.
Right.
So there is that aspect, you know, we all have trauma. We all experience things that knock us out of alignment. We all have something going on with at least one of our chakras at any given moment.
Right.
Regardless of what's defined and what's undefined. So actually, I find it a whole lot easier to tell when I'm not doing energy work what somebody is.
Okay.
Like, through my undefined centers, I generally know, like, immediately if I am in the presence of sacral energy.
Okay.
Because I have a completely wide open sacral.
Right.
So, like, I know.
Right, right.
I could feel your sacral energy when I got out of the car.
Okay.
It's like, I know when that's happening.
Right.
And it's the same for the root. I was at a human design retreat a couple of months ago, which was amazing. And I was coming down a mountain because we were in the mountains. It was an experience that I don't necessarily recommend, lots of steps. But, but there was somebody behind me who had a defined root. Now, I did not know the person behind me, not really. And I did not know whether or not she had a defined root logically.
Right.
But as she was behind me, and she was like 5 steps up. I mean, she was not crowding me or anything, but I could feel it. I could feel that adrenalized root energy just like trying to push me and push me. and like I literally turned around and looked at her and said, "Do you have a defined root?"
Which you can do at a human design retreat.
Yes.
Everyone's going to know.
Yes. What's funny was she didn't know. She looked at me and said, "I don't think so." And I said, "Would you mind checking?" Right. So she popped out her phone and she looked at it and said, "Oh, yes, I do have a defined root. How did you know?"
That's so awesome.
And I said, I could feel it. Like, it was behind me and I could feel it putting pressure on my undefined root.
Right.
So it doesn't always come up in energy work, but I actually really like to know someone's human design beforehand.
Okay.
Before I do a Reiki session on them, because if they have a lot of open centers, like especially projectors, they may be more sensitive to Reiki or any kind of energy work. So I like to be more careful with people who have a lot of open centers. Whereas, you know, like with manifesting generators, I can go all out and it's like fine.
Right.
They'll wonder if anything even happened.
It just seems really like compatible to work with both of them. Mm-hmm.
It is.
As you're like diving into someone's chart and then doing the energy work and like guiding them on, you know, this was this chakra needed a little bit more. That one was really like powerful. And it makes sense, right? If they had just had their chart done, like, okay, that, you know, they might start making connections with where they're maybe not as charged up, you know, and they could maybe put more intention into those themes or spaces to try to keep that energy more balanced. Like after they leave, after you've done that energy work, now they feel balanced. And then they might be able to say, okay, well, I want to try to stay in a balanced state. Maybe I'll be more aware of where I'm like leaking energy out or how I can recharge that space.
Right. Yeah. Because for people with a lot of openness like you, I looked at your chart and it was so interesting to me because the first thought I had was this person wanted to be a generator in the most efficient way possible.
Yes.
And wanted everything possible open. And I just thought that was fascinating because you are a generator, but you have so much openness in your chart. I mean, like that is one supercharged empath.
Yeah.
Like wide open solar plexus, wide open spleen. And if I remember correctly, open head too. And that was just incredible to see. Open throat. Yeah, you have an open throat too. It's like everything's just so very open.
Okay.
And so there's like a lot of opportunities for empathy. So it makes sense to me that you're a bit reclusive because that's a lot of energy to have passing through you at any given time. That can be really, really intense.
Yes, I have to be really mindful of like my energetic hygiene. And I have a prayer that I learned through the records that's literally focused around if this energy isn't mine, I release it because I will notice that sometimes I'll have anxiety, but I'll check in and I'll be like, okay, my bills are paid. My kids are healthy. My home is clean. I am successful in this moment. Why? Oh, and then I'll say the prayer and I'm like, okay, so I must have picked that up somehow. And I don't know, like I can't remember the exact moment it started affecting me, but I do feel like I've read something where it's like engulfing other people's energies, and I do tend to do that. Like I will feel the person around me, if they're sharing a story, like it's hard for me not to be really, I have to be careful even with television. Mm-hmm. Because it's like my brain doesn't know that it's not real. And I'm like,
Right.
we need to not watch TV today. I just want to have a regular day. I don't want to, be crying over some dog dying on the television.
Oh, yeah. No, I won't watch anything where the dog dies.
I know. It's my son like laughs at me now. He's like, yeah, Mom can't watch The Lion King and Mom can't watch Fox and Hound. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's just really sad.
It's like, really sad. I swear. It's like, I feel like it is Disney's sole goal in life is to make the adults around them cry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's literally like a joke with my son. He's like, oh, Mom, want to watch The Lion King? No, I don't.
No, absolutely not.
I have seen it. So we know what happens. Like, if you want to just watch the one song where they're singing, that's fine.
We knew that.
We can do that. So, yeah, definitely some intense empathy where I've had to be more mindful of how much I'm taking on other people's, not just their emotions, but sometimes their pain.
Yes. Well, you have a wide open spleen, so that makes absolute total sense. Yeah, the spleen, again, all about bodily wellness. So if you have an open spleen, you are more likely to be able to feel others people's pain, but also their anxiety.
Right. Yeah.
And you get a double whammy of other people's anxiety too, because you've got the splenic anxiety that you get to feel in others, but you've also got the ajna anxiety that you get to feel in others. So that's really fun.
So I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about the incarnation cross. And it's something that I liked when I discovered my incarnation cross. I was like, this sounds really nice. Mm-hmm. But like, how do they get that? Where does it come from? And how am I affiliated with Mr. Rogers? Because when I looked it up, the big thing that was like, okay, I like this is Mr. Rogers had the same incarnation cross as me. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It felt so good. I was like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, because you are like, your whole chart just screams unconditional love.
Aww.
You've even got the incarnation cross of the vessel of love.
Right.
And so it's very beautiful. So the incarnation cross is comprised of actually 4 different gates. And it is in this order, like, because it matters. The order really matters.
Okay.
So it goes your conscious sun gate, and conscious is the black one on the right. And then your conscious earth gate. Then we move over to the unconscious, which is usually red, and it's on the left. And that is your unconscious sun gate and your unconscious earth gate. So it's actually 4 gates that make up your incarnation cross. Mm-hmm. And your incarnation cross is basically just like this little synopsis of your life purpose. Personally, I actually really hate the way human design does the incarnation cross. I think it's irresponsible to just tell someone that these 4 gates make up 70% of your chart and this is your life purpose and it's 3 sentences long.
Right.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just, with mine being love, I kind of look at that as like, it might be a reoccurring theme. Mm-hmm. And it lines up with my astrology, which I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this, that my North Node is conjunct Venus in the first house of my natal chart. And when I hear it cross at the vessel of love, it made, and I'm not sure if it's affiliated, but when I heard that, it was just like love would be a theme that I would continually explore. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to experience hate. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean so it's like, don't let it completely define your whole life, but maybe sit with it and say, is this something, like, how did I feel when I read that,
Yeah. And they are not technically related. But since human design is a synthesis of so many different things, it is very common to find synchronicities amongst the things that human design is made up of.
Right.
So it doesn't surprise me that happens. Like I have a defined solar plexus, so I have an emotional wave, and my moon is in Cancer, which is highly emotional. And I'm pretty sure it's in the 12th house, which I think makes it worse.
Yeah, we could talk about that later.
Cool. I have exhausted my astrology knowledge.
Right.
So But the thing about the incarnation cross is I just don't think it goes in depth enough. That's actually why when I do like one of my main readings, we actually devote an entire hour to the incarnation cross because I like to go really deep. Right. And this is when I like to incorporate the gene keys.
Okay.
And so human design is not the gene keys, and gene keys is not human design, but gene keys is pretty loosely based off of human design.
Okay.
Like if you look at your gene keys chart, they call them different things. They call them like spheres. But you will notice that like the life's work sphere is exactly the same as your conscious sun gate.
Okay.
It's because that life's work sphere is based on your conscious sun gate.
Right. It's directly linked.
Yeah. So the activation sequence in the gene keys is your incarnation cross in human design.
All right. Okay.
So when we talk about the incarnation cross in human design, I really like to delve into the gene keys for that because it goes so much more in depth. It gives you a lot more information. It's actually incredibly beautiful. Like the way that Richard Rudd writes is incredibly poetic, which to me is actually kind of annoying, but a lot of people like it.
Right.
I'm just practical down to my marrow, so I spend a lot of time reading it thinking, please get to the point.
Give me the keynotes, please.
Yes. And that's what I usually do. It's like, I'll just give you like the Cliff's Notes version because every sphere, he calls them spheres, we call them gates in human design, he will go on for like 4 pages for each one. So we kind of narrow that down a little bit and get you what actually matters.
Right. It's good to have something to focus on that you can actually integrate because 4 pages is great. But when you're like driving down the road, like it's going to be hard to be like, well, what was that 4 pages saying?
Right.
That's where summarizing it is like really helpful.
Right. Like for me, my life's work, which is the first sphere in human design, not in human design, in the gene keys, that is gate 7. And it's 7 line 5, so it's 7.5. And that is really all about providing supportive structure and helping. It's kind of like building a scaffolding for people to climb on to better themselves. So like that's an aspect of my life that I focus a lot of attention on, is helping people help themselves.
Right.
And helping people solve their problems, because line 5, it's all about solving problems. So that's just like one example. It's like your life's work in the gene keys is kind of like what you do. And then you move down to your conscious earth, which for me is gate 13. And this in the gene keys is like how you grow. This is your challenges in life. So yeah, it's what you do and then how you grow. For me, gate 13 is the gate of the listener. So it is, this is the gate that I'm really focusing on right now. And I am finding that the more that I listen, the more that I grow. And it's not necessarily about listening to other people, though obviously it can be. I've been spending just like a half an hour to an hour, depending on how I'm feeling in the mornings, and just listening to my environment. And it is amazing how much personal growth you can experience just by listening. But that's a me thing. Right. I mean, it's kind of an everybody thing because it's a form of meditation, and meditation's great. Right. But like it really, for me, fosters personal growth. Then we move on to the unconscious sun, which is your radiance in the gene keys, which is really how you heal and how you glow.
Okay.
Yeah, how you heal and how you glow. So then we move on to the unconscious earth, which is your purpose in gene keys. And in purpose land, it's really about how you be. It is your being. It's not quite who you are, because that's different. Like your whole human design chart is who you are.
Right.
But this is your being. This is how you be.
Right. On
Which
the
is-
earth.
Yes, this is how you be on the earth, which is like, to me, my mom's a grammar Nazi, so when I say that, it doesn't really make any sense. But I think I'm hoping more spiritual people will understand what I'm saying.
To
when I
be or
say-
not to be.
Yeah, that is the
To
question.
be.
So I really like to delve into the gene keys when it comes to something as important as your life purpose. I feel like it should be
Right.
more than 3 sentences.
Absolutely.
So
So how many incarnation crosses are there? So like for mine, is that a common one?
there's
Or-
192.
Okay. So it's unlikely that the people around you probably have the same one.
It is unlikely.
I mean, but you might. Like, I
You
have
might.
found one person, and we actually shared the same birthday, which made me interested. But he had the same incarnation cross as me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "How cool!" And he was a generator, and so
Any person who shares the same incarnation cross as you is going to be born at around the same time as
okay,
because it is based on like your birth date and time.
okay. I was
So,
wondering about that.
yes.
I'm like, there must be something.
There is, because that is all based on your timing.
Okay.
So, yes, that makes total sense that you guys would share the same birth date. If you share the same birth date with somebody, you're going to share the same incarnation cross with them.
Okay. That's
Generally speaking.
generally. It might be a
Yeah.
time thing too.
Yeah, because the lines change every 18 hours. So,
Okay, because we were also really close birth time.
yeah, then, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So, yeah, that's really cool to have met another person because, it's like, I think maybe working together and like being friends, we can kind of have the same overall energy in our life is to, explore love.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice to have another person where I do just know this random fact about them. And we can do the Mr. Rogers thing together.
But what's funny is, you can have the same incarnation cross as somebody, but be a completely different type.
Right.
And have a completely different authority.
Okay.
And have absolutely nothing else in common.
Right. Okay.
So, because, you can be born in a different year. Now, if you guys are born at, the same place, the same time, the same year, all the things,
Then
you're
it
going to
would-
have a lot of commonalities. But,
Right.
but, I don't know if you guys were born in the same year.
We're not.
Okay. So you might not be the same types.
Yeah, I think we were both generators, which is so common that it makes sense.
Yeah.
But okay, that's good to know. So how or what's a reading like when someone comes to you and books a reading and sits down with you, what are some of the main things that they can expect to gain from that reading? And just what does the reading look like for people that have like anticipation anxiety and they don't book because they're like, I'm kind of afraid of what I might hear. Or, I think some people think they might hear something they don't like about themselves or, they're going to have work to do or.
Sure. And, you could do that if you want. Like
Right.
I have a reading that's actually 6 sessions long. I call it my integration journey. And that dives really deep into your human design. So, in the first session, it's all about your type, strategy, and authority. And then we throw in the profile lines too, because that's very much, how you learn, how you interact with the world. So they kind of all work together. But then the second session, we actually go over each of the centers and the conditioning and the strengths and the perhaps less than ideal aspects of each of the centers and their openness versus their definition, whichever one you have. Then the third session, we go over your channels. Obviously, just the defined ones. We couldn't go over the undefined ones too because there's like 36 of them.
Right. But as they learn, then they can maybe do some of that on their own too.
If they want to, yeah.
Right.
That's a great opportunity to work with the transits.
Right.
And then the fourth session is when we focus on your incarnation cross. And we devote an entire session. It's like an hour. We dive deep
Right.
into each of the gates in your incarnation cross. They are really important. And 3 sentences is just not enough.
Right.
And then the fifth one, we talk about all of your conscious gates, anything that we haven't already gone over. And then the sixth one, we talk about your unconscious gates.
Okay.
So then we kind of get everything mostly covered. And one of the really nice things about the way that I've set that one up is it goes at your pace. So you decide when you are ready for your next appointment. It's not, I mean, I generally recommend maybe like once a month because it gives you enough time to actually integrate the information.
Right. While still having it kind of fresh.
Yes. Yes. So it gives you time to work with it and all the things. But that is just a general recommendation. It's a great opportunity to use your strategy and authority to decide when you're ready for another session.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah, I do too. So that's the big kahuna. You know, if you want to dive real deep, that's what you do. But I also have smaller sessions that are available, you know, if you're not ready for something like that, or if you're just not as interested as all of that.
Right.
So you can get like a really short, sweet little reading that's just your type, strategy, and authority. It only takes 25 minutes. And, you know, we give you just the bare bones information. And honestly, it's all you really need.
Right.
The other stuff is great. Most people want to know what their life purpose is. Most people want to know what the best way to do their shadow work is and all the things. But, you know, if you just want to hit the ground running, do your type, strategy, and authority, that is available.
Right.
And then there's kind of a middle ground reading that we can do. It only takes about an hour. We kind of hit the highlights, so it's not so deep. We do the type, strategy, and authority, and we go over your centers.
Okay. Awesome. I love that you have all these options. And I really love this, you know, the spaced out sessions, because I do think, as someone who has tried to learn this, it's overwhelming. And I really think giving little, like, okay, let's spend an hour, pause. Let's spend an hour,
right,
pause. Like, I think that might be what's missing in my own studies is like, I'm overwhelming myself and then I'm not coming back to it because I'm like, I don't want to get overwhelmed again.
Right.
But it's like, let's just focus. So it's like, you're really helping the person focus. This is what's the most, you know, important for this. And now let's move on to this.
Right. And that was, you know, I didn't used to do that. The integration journey is something I started about 6 months ago, give or take. And before that, I was doing the same in-depth sessions that most other human design readers are doing. And, you know, they take 2, sometimes 4 hours, especially if I was talking to someone who had a 1 in their profile, because they're very, very interested.
Right. Okay.
If you have a 1 in your profile, definitely get the integration journey. You're going to love it. But that was the issue. It was like, it was too much information all at once. So they really weren't integrating that information. It's just
like
information
frying
overload.
their circuits.
Exactly. So I've had much more success with the integration journey and taking things slow and easy. It's just, it works better for everybody.
Right, because this wisdom is valuable and it's something that you can work with over the course of your life. So it's not like getting it all in one dose is necessarily the most helpful. You want to really be able to kind of master your own chart.
Right.
And it's hard to do that. I mean, look how long it took you to integrate all this wisdom.
Oh, I'm still integrating.
Right. It's going to be hard for you to really sit down for 1 hour and cover everything that's the most important.
Right.
So
Well, you can't.
Exactly. And
I tried. It's not possible.
Right. You know, so I love that you offer sort of the sneak peek thing for people that maybe just want to get a sample or, you know, the most important things. And then they can play with that and then come back and say, okay, now I'm ready, you know, to do more of a deep dive into this because this experiment is working. And it would be cool to know all the other ways that this could come into my life and I could work with it. So I love that. I think that is super cool. And I have tried hard to learn on my own. So I appreciate people like you who have taken the time to really master this and then decide to help others on the way. So yeah. Thank you for following your your calling. And you just seem like you would be great to work with.
Oh, thanks.
You're very knowledgeable, but also very kind and easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
And so I think, you know, if we were doing shadow work, like I would feel comfortable to work with you, like that you could sit with me and then maybe make it lighter and it could be like, this is how we can work with that energy. This is what you could do. This is an option, right? And I just think that's so nice. And I've never seen anyone offer that. So it seems really unique and valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what's the best way for someone to contact you to book a reading?
Through my website. I am not great at social media. So I do not recommend looking me up on social media. It's probably a mess. So definitely my website is the best way to go. I've made it super introvert friendly to book a session with me. You do not have to call. You do not have to email. There's just an appointment link right there on my website. So you don't have to do any extraneous work and you just pay right there. I tried to make it really easy. I am an introvert myself, so I know if I had to call to set something like this up, I would just never do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, website is for the best. It's yourabundantdesign.com.
Okay.
And one other thing is we've talked about the transits a lot on this podcast. I'm very passionate about the transits, manifester. I do also have transit calendars on my website for sale, and they are personalized transit calendars. They are also ADHD friendly.
Thank you.
Because I have ADHD. And so like they're actually planner pages. And they are set up like in the classic happy planner size, because that's the size I like. And they are very much set up for ADHD brains.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. I'm totally going to have to look into it because I just feel like you're like the key to help me actually understand my chart and to work with it and not just get a bunch of like random facts about, but what does it mean for me? Right. And that I think that personalization is important. And that's matters. When you're Googling stuff, it's so generalized. And I think that might be where people are like, I don't necessarily align with this. And it's like, but when you have a reading, they're looking at all of this. Right.
And, the thing about Googling the human design stuff is a lot of it's really negative.
Right.
And that's kind of an issue that it's pervasive in human design. And a lot of that goes actually back to the founder, Ra Uru. He was also a manifester, but he also had the gate of shock. And so, and it was the 80s, God bless him. So like every description that he has for all of these channels, it's always, well, not always, but like a great lot of the time, it's in the negative.
Right.
It's in the low expression of the gate and the channel.
Right.
And that's one thing that I will give to, Karen Curry Parker for quantum human design is she really brought the higher perspective.
Okay.
So that's nice. It gives it more of a balance.
Right.
Because, human design is very much a polarity. So it gives you the other aspect. But on the internet...
Right. You might not get the full scope of.
You definitely don't get the full spectrum. And they're definitely not going to tell you how your unconscious Mars in gate 34 affects you very specifically with your specific line expression. And like all of that, it's a factor.
Right.
You can even go into the colors and tones of each of the gates if you want to. I don't usually go quite that deep because you're too far into the weeds.
Right.
But, the planet absolutely colors the gate, and that absolutely colors the line expression. So that's all very important and personalized.
Right.
And that's part of the reason I like to do the personalized calendars.
Right.
And for neurotypicals, I also have a Google calendar thing that you can do.
Okay.
So
awesome. And so people can either do these in person or through Zoom, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if they're in a different state, because we do have audience listeners and all over the world.
Yes. Over Zoom is totally fine. And that is, it's actually a different option on my website. Like you can choose, do you want an in-person or do you want Zoom? And there's like a different button.
Right. And so you're local to the Knoxville area.
Yes.
So those, if you did in person, it would be somewhere around
West Knoxville.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative and exactly what I have wanted. When I first did the podcast in my intro, one of the things I talked about was I really hope to find someone who can do an episode on human design. And it's like 75 episodes later, I got the deep dive that I was craving. And I know that the audience is going to so appreciate the time that you have spent on this, and you have articulated it so well. And I actually think it's starting to click for me. So I hope that the audience is also like, thank God someone has made this, more grounded, and like it's really nice. So I appreciate you coming on and taking this time. And I know our audience will love your work. So.
Well, I really appreciate you having me because I love talking about human design. I could go on for another 5 hours, but I don't think anybody else's attention span could handle that. So,
well, if you ever want to come back on and focus on something else, you're always welcome. So,
okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.